Welcome this afternoon, viewers. Thank you for joining us in this special e-workshop with the theme, Building Consensus on how to address systematic land titling and physical planning, land fragmentation and disputes in Uganda. In a nutshell, we are dealing with systematic land titling with an aspect, discussions on physical planning, how land is fragmented in Uganda, and the disputes that arise thereafter. It's a solution-oriented discussion from my distinguished panel, whom I'm going to introduce in a moment. And this e-workshop is part of the program to secure access to land and resources. It's a project, and the project improving tenure security of smallholder farmers in selected areas in Uganda. So smallholder farmers are part of the interest here in our discussion. And I would like to introduce my panel. To my immediate left is Professor Moses Musinguzi from the Dean of School of Built Environment, Makerere University. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, viewers.
And immediately to his left is Dr. Abi Sebina Ziwa, who is a researcher and consultant anthropologist. You're welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
Dr. Sabina, anthropologists, what do they do? Let me just, in a few seconds.
Anthropology is a discipline, an academic discipline that studies the behavior and culture of people in various areas.
Absolutely. And to her left is Mr. Vincent Biendamira, who is the acting director, Fiscal Planning and Urban Development in the Ministry of Lands Ministry. Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
And thank you for representing government here.
Thank you.
Let me invite Professor Musinguzi to give us opening remarks and some kind of background to this discussion. Professor.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good evening or good afternoon, viewers on NTV and other participants who have joined in on the Zoom e-platform. I would like to request that I put a little bit down my mask so that you can see me and so that I can be able to talk with more flexibility. The good thing is that we are already keeping a safe distance and there is no risk that anyone is going to infect the other. So today we are having an important discussion about how do we handle our land affairs in Uganda. This is a very important discussion because, you know, our economy is largely dependent on utilization of land and natural resources. This discussion, as the moderator has already mentioned, is part of the work that we, as Makerere University, together with the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, supported technically by UN Habitat and Global Land Tour Network, and financed by BMZ. This is the Germany International Development Corporation, have been engaged in. We have been doing this work in various parts of the country, including southwestern Uganda and northwestern Uganda. But UN Habitat has already supported similar work in other parts of the country, and also UN Habitat has supported the strengthening of Land Policy Implementation Unit in the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. So what is the focus of this discussion? As you know, land is a very interesting topic, and it is interesting and unique in a way because there are so many players, so many professionals. It's like a marketplace. All of us come with different expectations, different perceptions, and so on. And therefore, to be able to agree on how we should approach our land becomes very complicated. Normally, consensus is supposed to be built through a national land policy, but even when you have a land policy, you'll still have some people who are not very sure or who are not in agreement with some of the provisions. So this is the work that we've been doing, and mainly we've been looking at how can we make the best use of our land. As you know, our National Development Plan, which is also in conformity with the Sustainable Development Goals, that is the Global Agenda 2030, we actually anticipate a lot of input from land for us to be able to develop. And this one is also reflected in the Vision 2040. Therefore, the way we manage our land actually affects how quickly we shall be able to achieve our development goals. Now, one way of ensuring productivity in land is making sure that people who hold land or those who hold land rights are very secure. You'll agree with me that if you don't have secure rights in land, then it becomes very difficult to invest. For example, if you have land and you don't have ownership, it is very difficult for you to put a meaningful investment on the land. Therefore, one approach of ensuring development in land is to make sure that people have legal documents which gives them security to invest in the land. We've been doing this work in various parts of the country where we help smallholder farmers to get documents, for example, certificates of customary ownership, land titles, and even forming communal land associations. However, we have also noted that actually there are other threats that may affect the productivity of land apart from the security of tenure. And namely, the ones that we are going to discuss today are, one, not being able to adequately handle the problem of land use planning and physical planning. Then secondly, how do we handle our land disputes? Regarding the first one, which is also a subject of discussion today, as you may observe, and also what we have observed through our work, when you go in the rural areas, you will see that people stay everywhere, they cultivate everywhere, we bury our dead everywhere. We don't have any guidance on what should be done, so there is no proper order. Also because of our cultural practices whereby if you are the father, you have 4 sons, you will subdivide your land amongst your 4 sons. And if they also get 4 sons, now those will be 16, they will also subdivide their land amongst those. So because of that, we are seeing land becoming smaller and smaller. If you look at the areas that we have visited, for example, in Kisoro, in Ajumani, in Mitiana, the land sizes are so small that it is becoming increasingly difficult to practice any commercial agriculture. And yet this is one of the areas that we are actually focusing on in our development plan. So the question is, will government programs such as systematic titling yield the benefits among this state of affairs? This is the question that we pose and which I think our discussants will be able to answer. Then secondly, as the population and land size, as the population increases and the land size diminishes, also land values go up, then disputes also go up. We have our formal dispute mechanisms, the court systems, the tribunals, which are very slow, very complicated, and they may not cater for the needs of the poor, or they may not cater for the need of an investor who wants to make investment in a very short time. Most criminal cases, if you go to police, if you go to courts, such as murder, domestic violence, assault, and so on, they have their rooting in land disputes. So when we are doing statistics, we don't only look at those land cases, land disputes, but we also look at the criminal cases. Now, there is also lack of clarity on the hierarchy of dispute resolution institutions. If I have a dispute, I can decide to take it to the LOC. I can also take it to RDC. I can also take it to an elder or a group of elders, or I can take it to court, or I can take it to any other institution or police. So we need to build synergy so that there is a proper hierarchy in which these land disputes are handled. Now, the question that we pose also, which is going to be covered under this discussion, first of all, how can land disputes be prevented or minimized? And finally, how can dispute resolution mechanisms be improved so as to promote investment in land? If we provide answers and solutions to these questions, I think we shall have gone a very long way in improving our land so that it contributes to national development and also to the sustainable development goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for that background. Viewers, we have other participants joining us, panelists, so to speak, online. And we have Mr. Simon Peter Mwesige, who is a land tenure advisor, UN Habitat and Stroke Global Land Tool Network. Mr. Mwesige, you're welcome. We also have Dr. Charles Kojo Amoti, and that is joining us from as far back as Hoima. He's a consultant, fiscal planner, and environmentalist, and is the CEO of Urban Research and Training Consultancy. And finally, we have Miss Grace Angeline Chelimo, who is a resource person on land justice for the Law, Justice and Order Secretariat. Certainly all of you, our panelists, are qualified to be on this panel and to speak to us on this issue that Professor has given us a background to. Let's move on to Mr. Simon Peter Mwesige from UN Habitat and the Global Land Tool Network. Please, you're welcome to give us opening remarks as we delve into the discussion.
On behalf of the UN Habitat and the Global Land Tool Network, I am greatly honored to make brief remarks at this important national dialogue on how to address systematic land titling and certification, physical planning, land fragmentation, and disputes in Uganda. I am Simon Peter Mwesige, as already introduced. I coordinate the program of the Global Land Tool Network and UN Habitat in Uganda. First, I take this opportunity to greet all the panelists, viewers of NTV Uganda, and all who are joining the discussion through Zoom. I would also want to thank Makerere University, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, and the management of NTV Uganda for organizing such an important dialogue on key land issues in Uganda. Land governance is a fundamental prerequisite for sustainable development, poverty reduction, sustainable urban and rural development, and fulfillment of human rights. Yet, in many developing countries, including Uganda, a significant proportion of the population still access land through land tenure systems, with land rights which are still undocumented and out of formal land administration system. land services are still unaffordable for majority of the population. There are also systematic inequalities, for instance, in regard to women access to secure land rights. Rapid urbanization and conflict, for instance, in the case of refugees, is increasingly putting pressure on land and natural resources. Land disputes, as already mentioned by Professor Msingzi, they are increasingly high. Over 60% of all land disputes in courts of law are land related. This is a significant amount of disputes that are taking place in Uganda, and we really need urgently to find a solution. Land use planning and development control is also still a challenge. Land rights legislation and policy in Uganda is strong, but implementation is not robust to guarantee secure land and property rights for all. The current health crisis due to COVID-19 pandemic has magnified these issues. This is evident in increasing reports of number of evictions in due part to loss of livelihood caused by the halt in economic activities caused by social distancing rules, leading to inability to pay rent, but also elites who are using the reduced space for oversight and accountability as an opportunity to seize land, especially targeting the vulnerable. In response to these challenges, Global Land Tool Network, as facilitated by UN Habitat in partnership with government and other key land stakeholders in Uganda, is supporting the implementation of the National Land Policy. This has also already been highlighted by Professor Msingzi. Under this support, one of the projects being implemented is the one which is funded by the German government, Secure Access to Land and Resources, whose goal is to improve food and nutrition security, incomes, and resilience of local populations, especially those living in rural areas, through secure and fair access to land and resources. The project targets to secure land rights of at least 30,000 households, comprising of mainly rural, poor women, men, and vulnerable groups in Uganda, Laos, and the Philippines. In Uganda, the project targets 15,000 households and works in Kisoro, Adjumani, and Padel districts. Similar interventions, also as already highlighted, are being implemented by GLTN in Mbale, Butaleja, and Kavale districts. So far, the project has built capacity of local government actors in the project sites to register customary land rights. 9,500 households' land parcels have been mapped and adjudicated and will be issued with certificates of customary ownership. Women land rights are given special attention. Many long-standing disputes have been successfully resolved, among other milestones. We recognize that land issues are complex, and therefore not one entity or organization can provide the needed solutions. So we are grateful for the long-standing and strong collaboration with other partners in government, civil society, research, and academia. We learned great lessons from this first phase of customary certification process in Uganda. We have learned that the process is doable, it's affordable to the communities, and can be implemented at scale. UN Habitat, in partnership with Ministry of Lands, Housing, and Urban Development, is committed to scaling up these interventions to reach more households in Uganda. I wish to thank the Ministry of Lands, Housing, and Urban Development, district local government partners, Makerere University, School of the Built Environment, and Uganda Community-Based Association for Women, Children Welfare, our implementing partners, for the role they played leading to successful implementation of the project and in organizing this dialogue. We are grateful to our donors, the German government, through the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. We are lucky to have this panel composed of many knowledgeable persons who have contributed to building land sector institutional structures, our land policy and laws, formal, informal, and customary practices, our education and information bases, and our records. We have many land professionals in various fields who have joined us through Zoom, from civil society organizations, in education institutions, in private sector, and in government. Personally, I look forward to learning from this rich panel. Finally, we recognize that the world is ever changing and the need of people is not static. Therefore, our response must be continual revision of our policies, laws, programs, and strengthening reforms of our institutions and interventions. Accordingly, we request your views and active participation on how we can strengthen Uganda's land administration and management. Thank you and wish you an engaging and fruitful discussion. Without further ado, back to you, the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Mwesige, on your opening remarks. We appreciate. You said something there that I will not forget, that customary land is being registered. I think that's one good step in the right direction, among one solution that is going to help us deal with land conflicts. We will now invite Mr. Charles Kojo Amoti. I'm told he's not in Hoima, he's in Kampala actually. Mr. Kojo, we want to hear from you the state of land use planning and implementation in Uganda, but also answer the question, what land use policy can minimize land fragmentation and promote transformation so that land can be used commercially? We want to hear some answers to those questions. You're welcome, Mr. Kojo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and all the viewers on this very innovative discussion on land perspective in Uganda. I'll give my presentation in three perspectives. I'll give the historical background of physical planning, implications, challenges, and the magnitude of the problem which we face in the country. And I also put the elephant in the room by trying to show the current national land use balance sheet and give the projections for the future 2040, 2060. And possibly at the end, I'll give some recommendations, interventions on how possible we could be able to address these pertinent issues. Physical planning in this situation is going to be used interchangeably with land use planning. They're the same thing, and they are used to prepare both urban and rural plans. And in many cases, the outcomes are oriented towards a strategic plan. And these relate to the use of the sparse expression of the desired socio-economic developments on the ground. So that's in a nutshell what's physical planning or land use per se. So historically, our planning system has evolved from the colonial perspective. And Uganda as a country is very, very young in planning. So we have had some planning schemes, detailed levels at neighborhoods, and the first plan in Kampala, formal plan, started 1903 for Kampala, that time a small municipal council. And over time, they have had various plans, 1951, 72, 94, and the current one, where even the areas do extend and become bigger because of the population and the need for guidance for the various types of development. We also have plans in the rural areas. These are basically, if you look at agricultural estates like Akira, Lugazi, Sangobe, Kinyara, tea estates, these were formerly planned areas in the perspective of the rural kind of settings. But they were very small and they were only specifically for those kind of private organizations or governments. We also have some cases, some housing estates coming on board, which have been planned at scale, and also things like mining areas. For those who are aware, Kilembe, the Kilembe mines was well organized and well planned. The ministry has now, of late, I think, prepared about 2 or 3 plans. One of it has been the urban graben at a regional level. And then we have also the Greater Kampala at metropolitan level plan. Now, in 2018, we have, which have been part of, developed a national physical development plan. Uganda, it's unfortunate that we did not do this kind of planning of a higher level to guide all other plans to be able to be in conformity so that the conflicts are resolved and be able to guide other sectors' involvement of our development needs. So currently, we could say maybe 10, 15% of the country
Okay. Mr. Kojo, we lost your audio a little bit.
Formal plans, or as a country, a national development plan, is that we shall have HABZAD, which eventually create things to relate to the surveying, because the surveying is being done without consideration of whether the area is planned or not. And in so doing, despite the fact that the country has been declared a planning area, we still see many of the things, issuing of titles, issuing of planning permits at various levels, and therefore having a lot of impacts which relate to the environment, natural resources. And to highlight on the issue of the lack of formal physical planning, our population is growing at a very alarming rate. And we think by 2040, which is a reality, Uganda shall be about 75 to 80 million population. And planning is about location, location, location. Where will these people live? What will they do? What sustain them? So it's very important to ensure that all these things are taken care. Some of the implications are that as a country, we have not balanced public use and individual interests. Planning or land use is about public vis-a-vis land uses. So these have given a lot of demands on land, and therefore we see a lot of uncoordinated human settlements, disjointed sectoral policies, even the MDAs, the ministries, departments, and agencies. If we were to really have proper development planning, they should also be able to comply with the national development plan and regional plans and those at lower levels. So we see economic disparities because physical planning is supposed to ensure the balance of the country's development are attained, and there could be special interventions to ensure some of these things do not have other impacts on the land use as per se. We also have this kind of situation inefficient transport and infrastructure frameworks having problems because the physical plans which is supposed to guide the development of these infrastructure, which are a catalyst for development, do not follow or are not there as yet to harmonize and integrate them with the national plans or land uses in place. I'd want to show the current national land use balance of the country. Uganda, as a country, is 241 square kilometers. And we don't intend to increase this land. And in so doing, you'll find that the total area which is devoted to agriculture currently is about 108,000 square kilometers, which represents about 54% of the total land area in Uganda, where currently the 40 million people are doing agriculture. But within the agriculture setup, we also have arable lands, we have permanent areas under crops, which is about 22%, 22,000 square kilometers, and then areas which are devoted to other types of agriculture, pasture, 22,000 square kilometers. The grasslands in our country stretch all along from the cattle corridors, and they account for about 22,000 square kilometers. So this is the total area of agriculture which we have. And the forests account for about 6.5%. And then wetlands, which is about 26,000, account for 13% of the types of wetlands, including both permanent and seasonal wetlands. These wetlands, seasonal ones, appear possibly when it rains, and in dry seasons, you don't see them. And in so doing, we also have protected areas, which is about 10,000, 5.2%. And then the settlements, where people are settled, both urban and rural, is about 9,000 square kilometers, which constitutes 4.5%. The water bodies, Lake Albert, Lake Kyoga, Lake Victoria, is about 41%. This is the current land uses of this country we're talking about. And therefore, we have to ensure that the 80 million, which is supposed to be attained in the year 2040, if nothing happens to population, it means we shall need extra 16,000 square kilometers of land arable to be used to sustain the population in Uganda. And this means our yield production should be 3 times the current production which we are going through. And we still have pressures from some of the areas like wetlands.
Dr. Kojo, your framing is a little bit off. Dr. Kojo?
We see that we need...
Your framing is a little bit off. If we can get you framed properly and you continue. You have 2 minutes, sir.
So I was saying, so we need to have, for instance, 11% of the country devoted to urban and rural settlements. So this is what should be the optimum and able to sustain the development of the country's plans. And the interventions are, one quick one is that the ministries, development agencies, and all the developers should be able to comply with the National Physical Plan. And by so doing, to be able to comply with the National Physical Plan, we should also be able to start looking at public resources, payment of public resources Otherwise, a lot of things are happening here without any money coming in such a public resources. And I strongly believe that the country, we should be able to invest in the land bank and also in urbanization as a very strategic policy so that we can have people settled in these urban areas, and we tried free land for the agricultural activities and for other infrastructure like express highways, water, and the others left for protection of the tourism, and also increase on the density. Our density is very, very low. We think it's appropriate to have 10,000 people per square kilometer if we were to attain urbanization of a country at 60%. So this will need land readjustments, consolidation. If government can invest in, say, 2-3 billion today to acquire land currently, other than waiting for the future to buy land, which will be very expensive, because the problem won't be solved. The issue is now, government should start acquiring land for the good interest of the public. We should look at new agricultural land. For instance, the area which is now cattle corridor should be converted to strategic agricultural areas. And things to do with restrictions on these land uses and government should be able to be taken seriously and enforcement. In other words, priority of the planning in this country is paramount. Others will have to be guided by these plans in short. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kojo, Dr. Kojo, Charles. I like the way you ended. I didn't know actually 4.5% is the land where all of us sit of the 240,000 square kilometers for Uganda. 4.5% of that land is where all of us sit in rural and urban areas. That's an interesting number. And you said several things of now. Planning needs to take place now. Because if we live to the future, problems. The next person is a government person. Mr. Vincent Biendamira is the Commissioner and Minister of Lands. And Vincent, we need to hear from you a little bit on what Dr. Kojo has said there, but also on government policy on systematic titling of land and land use planning. If we can mix that in about 8 minutes. Response and also giving us your views.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. And thank you, Dr. Charles Kojo, for giving us an insight into land use planning in this country and its related brothers and sisters. I will deal with mine in two parts. The first part is I will look at the policy environment in as far as planning and all these things are concerned. And then on the second part, I will give quickly a snapshot of what government actually is doing about these policies. And then I make a conclusion, and I suppose my 8 minutes will be done. On the policies, I start certainly with the biggest one, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. If you check Article 242, it says, Article 242 is about land use. It said land and environment. Sorry, land use exactly. And it says government may, under laws made by parliament and policies made from time to time, regulate the use of land. So it is government's intention to regulate the use of land. And there is a reason why land should be, the use of land should be regulated. And when you come down to the National Land Use Policy, in 2007, government, the Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development now, came up with a National Land Use Policy, which now tries to put into, action the provision in the Constitution. Under that policy, the overall goal is to achieve sustainable and equitable socio-economic development through optimal land utilization. Optimal land utilization, because you can use land suboptimally or and then there are a number of specific objectives there. I will just quote two of them. Specific objective number 2 says to adopt improved agriculture and other land use systems that will provide lasting benefits for Uganda. lasting benefits for Uganda. That is to capture, especially, by the way, when I was preparing for this, I thought that the stance for this discussion is biased towards the rural part of it. There is a bit of urban as well, which I will also pick, but mostly I looked at the rural part of it. And then specific objective number 5 of the National Land Use Policy says, to ensure planned, environmentally friendly, affordable and well-distributed human settlements for both rural and urban areas. So government set out to do that. Government would like to ensure that we have planned settlements, we have planned and organized settlements in both the rural and the urban areas, and all land uses really to be organized. The third policy provision is the National Urban Policy, which is a recent one, a recent policy of 2017, sorry, 2017. Objective number 3 of the National Urban Policy says, that objective is on promotion of urban competitiveness and productivity, and there are a number of strategies there. I just picked one strategy, number 3, which says improve access to land for economic development. So government intentionally would like to improve access of the, the citizens to land for purposes of economic development. And then when we go to the 4th policy provision, National Development Plan, that also has got policies that guide us in our work. The National Development Plan 3 now, which we are implementing, a very recent one. There are a number of provisions there. I will just talk about Chapter 5 on agro-industrialization. There's also a chapter on urbanization and others which are more relevant, of course, on the urban part of it. But on the rural part of it, Chapter 5 on agro-industrialization, intervention number 7 says to improve land tenure systems and land security mechanisms that promote inclusive agriculture investments. And when you go in details of that, there are things like improving the number of farmers with titled land, which is really heart of what we are looking at here, and it even goes ahead to look at women and people with disabilities, promoting policy of non-fragmentation of agriculture land among families, among family members. This is in the National Development Plan 3, which has just been recently approved this year, and many other provisions which are relevant to today's discussion. And finally, the National Fiscal Development Plan. The National Fiscal Development Plan is, Dr. Kojo has presented it, and I knew that he would get into a little bit of details of it, and so I set out not to get so much into details of it, but suffice it for me to say that this is the first plan, the first plan at that scale, at a national scale for Uganda. Of course, there are other countries that are implementing their 5th plan and others, but we are at our first one. We have made the first step, and we certainly will not stop at the first step. We should be moving. And it uses 2 main factors, land and the population. You had Dr. Kojo giving us the land balance and things. So it looks at population and land. The land is fixed. So this population growing this way and that way, in the next, how are we going to survive? How do we deal with it? How do we, and of course, what Dr. Musingizi talked about, people bequeathing land and subdividing it, and how do we deal with that kind of situation? The National Fiscal Development Plan looks at that. It has got some specifics. If I may just give one example. Under agriculture, we have got 3 maybe, but 2 main ones, main areas that it proposes. One is the strategic agricultural lands, which where we expect large agricultural farms and things, and it proposes, for example, the northwestern Uganda, I think that's Karamoja, to become a food basket for this country if we can introduce sufficient investment there in irrigation and other such schemes. Then there is secondary agricultural lands which are mixed with a lot of settlement. These are actually where you have a lot of people, and that's where also the urban places are, the cities and others are proposed. And then there is some new thing that it introduces, which it calls agru, or agriculture and urbanization. And agriculture and urbanization is where we expect that there should be a lot of industrialization. These are areas that are between the urban places proper and the rural places, in between there. And here we expect a lot of urbanization, a lot of agro industry to take place. Away from the policies, those are some of the key policies that guide our work in land use planning, in land tenure processes. I know that systematic land adjudication and certification will be talked about by Dr. Sebina here, so I did not go into details of that as well. So on actualization of these processes, what is government doing, or what are we doing, what have we done, what are we doing? One, we certainly prepared this plan, which I have just talked about, and like I said, going into details of it, I think you can be sure, viewers, that there will be a time when we will need to come here. We have already been here about it, but we'll come back here and other media houses to talk more about the National Fiscal Development Plan. So for today, we'll just mention that we have this plan, and it is a big plus for us to be able to control the land use in this country. Over the years, we have prepared many urban fiscal development plans. Not urban. You note that we have prepared urban. We have not actually prepared any rural fiscal development plan. I'm coming to that. We have prepared regional plans. Now, regional plans have got urban part and also a rural part. And so in that case, yes, but those are higher level plans. In terms of detailed plans, we have not prepared any rural detailed plans. So we are now piloting the third intervention. We are piloting rural planning in a sub-county called Kasangombe in Nakaseke district. We actually advertised countrywide, and we required local governments to apply because this is going to be the first time this is going to happen. It requires a lot of commitment, so we needed to be sure that we will get a local government that has commitment. So we are piloting that, and when we are done, as we go about it, and when we are done, we expect the following. One, we plan for, we are going to plan for and encourage communities to settle in nucleated areas. So we expect that this very scattered thing. Now, this is very complicated, I think, for Uganda. Anybody will agree with me, but it is not impossible. It is possible. And when communities start seeing where it is working well, you can be sure that you will see many communities running to it. Many countries have done this. We may achieve this at community level or initially at extended family level. If it becomes very difficult at community level, there are areas where you have extended families, uncle, brother, those ones. When you can put them, especially in areas where there are not too many permanent structures, it should be possible to achieve. We intend to organize communities into cooperatives. This is the only way you can deal with it. You organize communities into cooperatives, and when you do that, you expect that maybe they will now bring their land together. They look at it as one entity, and that is very easy when you talk about, for example, extended families. But we wish that it will extend to communities. So you have got one entity, this land, the small parcels become one piece of land, and they take decisions together. And when they harvest, they also take decisions on how to use the proceeds and things like that. And also when you go to bequeathing now, so these people should be holding like shares. So if I come with my 7 acres, Dr. Msinguzi comes, Professor Msinguzi comes with his 20 acres, and the doctor here comes with her 100 acres, we will calculate. We will have, we should be able to help these people to appreciate that, you see, your take in this is this percentage. And when you are bequeathing to your children, you bequeath them that one, and they can have smaller percentages. Well, of course, mathematically they will have bigger percentages of that small percentage. And, you know, that way then we should be able to avoid some of these problems that we have been experiencing in land fragmentation. This will require extensive sensitization, certainly, as you can imagine. We will require that cooperatives are strengthened, and we expect that once pioneering communities start reaping dividends from this, we should see other maybe communities actually requesting that we organize them that way. On systematic land adjudication, which will be, and certification, which will be expounded by my colleague, my neighbor here. For us as fiscal planning, we are putting in the planning part of it, the land use planning part of it. When we started this, I will call it SLAC, Systematic Land Adjudication and Certification. When it was started at the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, fiscal planning, land use planning was not that much in it. I remember some of the first areas were in the Uganda district and others. There was hardly any input by fiscal planning, but later on it was realized that it was necessary to do this. So, but then fiscal planning takes a long time. So we were like, okay, we need to come up with a fiscal planning which can provide guidance fast and can be relevant to this fast and moving activity. And so we developed an approach which we call fiscal planning, rapid fiscal planning, rapid fiscal planning appraisal, yes, RAPA. We normally call it just RAPA, the short part of it.
The viewers are following you with the acronyms.
So rapid fiscal planning is just basically really doing some fiscal planning intervention in a very short time. And the product of it is fiscal planning guidance. It is a framework, a fiscal planning framework or land use framework, which is not a legal document like the normal fiscal development plans. It's not a legal document, but it is a framework which is good enough to guide development and to guide the process of systematic land adjudication and certification. So that also is another intervention that we are going into, that we are actually already doing in various parts of the country. Even right now we have teams which are up country doing this. We have also recently amended the Fiscal Planning Act to give it more effectiveness. The Fiscal Planning Act is the one that gives that we use to do land use planning in this country. So recently we amended it, 2020 actually, it's brand new, to give it effectiveness. Some of the strong points of it now is it creates, for example, a new secretariat which is completely separate from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, and with its own staff. So it is not using us now in the directorate, but it's got its own staff to be able to move the issues of the National Fiscal Planning Board, which is the highest body in as far as fiscal planning in this country is concerned. It also streamlines planning planning committees at the local governments, at the towns, at the districts. We realized that the way it was set up was not working so effectively, so we have made some changes, and we expect that now it will be working effectively. It has strengthened the fiscal planning implementation system. This has been one of the biggest issues, and we are hoping to see improvement in that area. So the fiscal planning implementation mechanism has been strengthened by providing for offenses and deterrent penalties and many other provisions. I think I need to be moving towards the end of my submission. There are also other programs to improve plans implementation. We are piloting now this in 4 urban places, interventions to improve implementation of plans, where we need to do surveying and perhaps pegging of roads and making sure that the community actually knows where roads are passing, where public places are, and such other places. So those are some of the many interventions that government is implementing currently to be able to ensure that fiscal planning, land use planning, but also tenure security are improved. And by way of conclusion, I think I would like to say that as far as I'm concerned, it is really time for us, all of us Ugandans, to appreciate the value that we get, the development value, the aesthetic value, and the economic value that we get from organized development. Like I have said before, even here, there is no country in this world that has progressed, that has moved, that has not taken care of its spatial organization, that has not taken care of its fiscal planning. It's not there. You must take care of, you must get organized in order for you to be able to move to the next level where we would like to move as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I take also a comment from Dr. Kojo that in terms of planning Uganda, we are still young. For some of us, it would be scared and say, all these buildings are up. How are you going to move people without chaos? But we are still young, and in this first session of the discussion, we have gone about the plans, what ought to be done and what is being done in terms of policy and law. We have had a lot of that. We'll go for a break now. Viewers, don't go out, because the next session of discussion, which is driven by the ladies, first of all, the 2 ladies now, is very interesting. Land disputes, which we see every day. They will provide some solutions and analysis to land disputes. Please don't go away. We'll come back after the break. Welcome back to this EU workshop, and we are discussing on how to build a consensus on how to address systematic land titling and physical planning, land fragmentations, and disputes of a land type in Uganda. It's part of the project securing access to land and resources, otherwise known as SALA, and also improving tenure security of smallholder farmers in selected areas in Uganda. And we have several sponsors for this discussion: Makerere University, Ministry of Lands and Planning and Urban Development, German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, UN Habitat, plus its Global Land Tool Network. Those are the sponsors. And we finished off at looking at what ought to be done and what is already being done in policy and law towards systematic titling of land and also dealing with issues of land fragmentation. Now we want to move on to the issue of land conflicts. Online we have Miss Grace Angelino Chelimo, and she's going to speak to us about causes, types, and magnitudes of disputes of a land type in Uganda, and can the alternative dispute resolution, which is out of court, provide timely and affordable justice for all? If you don't go to court, can you get justice? Ms. Chelimo, you are welcome, please. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, panelists and viewers. It is my pleasure and honor to participate in this e-workshop. I thank the School of Built Environment, Makerere University, for organizing this important meeting, and the development partners for supporting this project. The justice, law, and order sector is a reform process ongoing, focusing on the administration of justice and maintaining law and order. We very much recognize that land is a key factor of production and a driver for economic social development. So in the fourth sector development plan, which we are currently implementing, we have prioritized access to land justice. Across the country, we have sector institutions. Those are the courts and the courts of judicature and local council courts, which register a very high number of land cases. And these cases have an implication on the criminal justice system. As you may all agree with me, there are many criminal cases out there, which include murders, among others, which are just as a result of land disputes. I will focus in my presentation majorly on the structural drivers and causes of land disputes, the types, the platforms for adjudication of land disputes, and ADR as the best means for adjudication of land cases. To start with, the key structural drivers of land disputes include population growth. We may all agree with me that Uganda's population has greatly increased. Uganda Bureau of Standards projected Uganda's media's population for 2020 at 41.6 million shillings. And this mounts a lot of pressure on land, which is a static asset. So population growth is a major driver of land disputes. The other drivers include ignorance of the law and corruption. We also have poverty, greed, and systematic inequalities, some of which are embedded on our cultural norms and practices, which majorly discriminate against women from holding property. According to the statistics and the Ministry of Lands, only 20% of women hold property in Uganda. The other causes that have contributed to land disputes in Uganda include fraudulent land acquisitions. We also have the unclear boundary demarcations. We have a breakdown in social cultural values and norms, including loss of historical knowledge of boundaries and cultural rights. Then we have unregistered interests in land. According to the Ministry of Lands, only approximately 20% of the land under Milo, leasehold, and freehold land tenure systems is registered. And for the land held under customary land tenure system, only 20,000 land titles have been issued by the Ministry of Lands. We also have other causes, which include the struggle for ownership and occupancy amongst tenants, amongst relatives and siblings, And we have the discrimination against women, which is embedded in culture. The major prevalent land disputes in Uganda include the boundary disputes, which are at household level, between districts, and also interstate. Then we have the ownership disputes. We have fraudulent transactions, inheritance and succession land wrangles, and illegal occupation. The most prevalent land disputes that have been registered in the courts of law are the fraudulent land transactions, inheritance and succession related land wrangles, and the boundary disputes. From my personal analysis, the most prominent land disputes under under the customary land tenure system and my law land tenure system. In Uganda, we have a wide range of platforms that resolve land disputes. Some are formal and the others are informal, and there are also other actors which mediate land disputes. The formal platforms for adjudication of land disputes include the local council courts too, which is a court of first instance for resolution of disputes arising under customary land tenure system. We have the local council courts too. We have the courts of judicature. And then we have the other actors, which include the traditional justice systems, which are provided for under Section 88 of the Land Act. We have the President's Office, the Resident District Commissioners, and the Land Desk under the President's Office. And we also have the civil society organizations, the advocates, and religious leaders, among others, which participate in mediation of land disputes. The justice law and order sector realizes the fact that, and acknowledges the fact that land disputes have taken long in the justice system, and we have come up with innovations which include alternative dispute resolution and other reforms to expedite the resolution of land disputes. These reforms include the implementation of case backlog strategies. We also have a provision of legal aid in place by justice centers. We are also building the capacity of the local council courts to be able to effectively deliver on their mandate. And then we are also creating linkages between the informal and formal justice system. We recently concluded a study on informal justice systems in Uganda, which will inform the linkage of informal and formal justice systems. Going back to the question that is before us on the table as to whether ADR can provide a timely and affordable justice for all, I do agree that ADR can provide a timely and affordable justice for all, because ADR is grounded in law. We as a sector are rolled out ADR to all courts of judicature and sector institutions, and we are training even the local council courts on ADR, specifically focusing on mediation as a mode of dispute resolution. ADR comprises of negotiation, conciliation, mediation, and we have focused on that as a key innovation to expedite the resolution of land cases. ADR has enormous benefits, considering the fact that numerous land disputes have clogged the justice system. ADR is a quick way of resolving these prevalent land disputes, because it provides an accessible and understandable process of dispute resolution to society. The processes are also commenced very expeditiously, and disputes can be settled promptly. ADR saves time, and it enables even the poor and vulnerable to access justice, because you can access it even in communities, because the traditional leaders can be in position to mediate your case effectively. ADR also promotes reconciliation amongst disputing parties. We realize that most of the land disputes that are prevalent in society have emotions attached to them, because everyone holds their land very dearly. And for that reason, we need to use alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to resolve land disputes. ADR also promotes values and aspirations of people using the African cultural perspective of justice. And you'll agree with me that all our societies employ these African traditional mechanisms of resolution of land disputes. when our land disputes arises in most of our communities, the first platform that community members approach are the traditional leaders. There are also challenges that we have seen as a sector in implementing ADR, and this include forum shopping. We have disputing parties who visit different platforms for adjudication of land cases. So this defeats the purpose of the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms in some cases. We also have ignorance of some stakeholders and the citizenry on legal processes and ADR. We have negative perceptions on ADR by some advocates and court users. We have limited facilitation as a sector for court-annexed mediations, which we are implementing. We also experience non-attendance of mediation sessions by some parties. We also experience limited number of mediators in some courts of law. You may visit some of our courts and find that there is no mediator. However, in such instances, the magistrates do mediate the matters, or they may even contact the public for religious leaders or civic leaders who are knowledgeable on mediation to mediate matters. We have the challenge of the absence of mechanism for monitoring and regulating mediators across the country. We may all agree that mediations are happening everywhere, in the informal justice platforms, in the civil society organizations, in the president's office, in sector institutions, but we do not have a regulatory framework for all those other mediations happening outside the formal justice system. So we are recommending that we need to have a regulatory framework to monitor and regulate mediators across the country. We also recommend that we need continuous public awareness of the populace on ADR and the benefits of ADR. We also need to scale up sensitizations of stakeholders on ADR. We need to train mediators across the country. This includes judicial officers, advocates, religious leaders, traditional leaders, among others in society. We also need to engender the mediation processes across the country, well considering the background that our cultural practices do not favor women. We need to engender these processes so that they are gender sensitive and that they will promote ownership of land by women. We also need to increase facilitation for court-annexed mediations, and we need to strengthen the supervisory role of local council courts by the chief magistrates. In the context of the disputes that are before the courts of law, we strongly recommend that we need to use an inquisitorial approach in handling land matters. The judicial officers who adjudicate land cases need to use such an approach, because the documents presented before you in court may not be adequate enough, that you need to go an extra mile to inquire about land disputes in order to come up with a just position. In conclusion, I am of the view that ADR is the best cheap, affordable, and cost-effective means of resolving land disputes, and we all need to embrace alternative dispute resolution mechanisms and its implementation, while we, as the justice, law, and order sector, implement reforms for expeditious adjudication of land cases. Thank you very much for listening to me, and back to you, the moderator.
Thank you, Grace, for explaining ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. In case you're wondering, it's an acronym which is common in these circles, but it doesn't mean anything apart from not going to court, going elsewhere apart from court. Thank you very much for that. We want to enjoin our last presentation before we come back to a little bit of discussion from Dr. Abby Sebina Ziwa, who is in the studio. And Abby, you're going to speak to us about systematic land adjudication, another tough word, as a means to address land disputes. What do you mean, first of all, by adjudication?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Adjudication is a systematic way of identifying the rights of individuals within a household and recording them with their input and then you take on the subsequent steps, which is after recording, you plot them, you have them verify them. Then it's the process that I'm going to explain. Yes. I would also like to thank Grace for that elaborate presentation about ADR. And I would like to reiterate the fact that a lot of research has revealed that land disputes are escalating for different reasons, and depending on what is going on, the population increase and all those other things. So that statistics has been with the government, and the government has taken on this by the horn to try and reduce the prevalence of land disputes. So in my presentation, I'm going to clarify the justification for systematic land adjudication and certification, explain how it has come about and where we are today, throw a little bit of light on the benefits for both the society and the government, and what we have learned throughout the process. So having been working closely with the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, there are, like in other sectors, strategic plans. So the first strategic plan for land management, administration and management in Uganda came a few years after the enactment of the Constitution and, of course, the Land Act. There we had what we call the Land Strategic Plan, which was LSSP1. And because of the statistics and the information coming out all about land disputes, the government decided to pilot this program. Now, systematic demarcation can connotate two things. One, under LSSP1, it is a government program, which it undertook to solve a problem. On the technical side, it's a process. Systematic demarcation is not unique to Uganda. It has been done elsewhere, so that's the technical part. So there are steps to take. But in this discussion, SD, as we called it in LSSP1, is a government program. So we piloted systematic land adjudication in 5 districts, and the essence of piloting was actually to learn how can we roll out this program, to learn from our own communities. As I said, systematic land adjudication is not unique to Uganda. It has been done elsewhere. But we could not transplant what has been done in Latin America to Uganda. We had to learn from our own environment. So that was the essence of the piloting, which we did in 5 districts under LSSP1, which was 10 years. And during that process, that period, there was also the developing a national land policy, which had to take into consideration the existing situation, but also to draw from what we were doing in piloting systematic land adjudication. So with the coming of the national land policy, systematic demarcation was one of the key objectives of LSSP2, which started in which is land strategic plan 2, following the first 10 years. Okay. So we had to do the LSSP2, and their systematic demarcation was one of the key objectives to address the land disputes. And so it changed the name, though, from systematic demarcation to systematic land adjudication and certification. And my colleague Vincent has pointed to that, to SLAC. So under SLAC and with the funding and harnessing from what we call CADEP, the CADEP is Competitive Enterprise and Development Program under the World Bank. We plan to roll out. We did roll out SLAC. And so that is, in short, that is systematic adjudication, which has a program, but as a technical term used worldwide, not only in Uganda. And under the technical aspect of it, systematic land adjudication, or SLAC as we call it in the ministry, has two aspects. There is the social aspect and there is the technical aspect of it, of course. Drawing from what we learned from LSSP1 and emphasizing what Grace has told us, there is a lot of lack of information and ignorance about the law. Ignorance is not the right word, but lack of knowledge about the law.
It's ignorance, actually.
So we learned from LSSP1 that we needed to do intensive mobilization and sensitization of the communities for them to accept what we are planning. And so there is that mobilization and sensitization of the community selected. There is also putting together teams of people who can work in those communities, drawn again from the communities. There is also training, not on the technical part, but on the social aspects of how this adjudication can be done. One of the key aspects of systematic demarcation is that it's all inclusive. That systematic demarcation is put against what we call sporadic titling, where I feel I need a title, I take the steps. Systematic demarcation is all inclusive. It takes care of everybody.
So everyone in a community
participates.
Will be demarcations will be shown for everyone.
For every household. Not only in the household. As Vincent has mentioned, the part of the training on the social part is putting these teams together, but also to use what he called wrapper, which is we use the people in the area to do their own planning, draw up a tentative plan of what this village is all about, where we identify the community resource, community resources, the well, the river, the mosque, the church, or whatever, and all those at the end of the day are supposed to get their own individual titles. I'm sure you have heard of wrangles between individuals and religious groups. No, it was our father who gave it to this, and then we want it back and all that. In this planning exercise and systematic demarcation, all those resources are identified and recorded and certified at the end of the day. So those are part of the 4 steps under the social. Now with this wrapper, we take on the technical aspect of systematic demarcation. In line, in confirmation of this wrapper, then we go in the village, house to house, to identify the rights holders at the household level, in the presence of those who are able, like neighbors, because as Grace pointed out, and from the researches we have done, the highest type of land dispute is between neighbors, is boundary. And this is higher in customary tenure than in registered tenure. Because, so we do it with within the community, with the people in the household, but the neighbors who are available can also take part, and they can affirm that no, he doesn't stop there, but they stop here. So if there is any conflict or misunderstanding, that's the adjudication part. We come to an understanding that no, the right boundary should be here. When we get to the households, we record the people who we call the rights holders. We identify the rights holders, we record them, then we survey the land with their participation. With modern technology, we can use the GPS, but where the GPS are absent, we can use the tape measures and come up with a sketch. The sketch under LSSP1, we actually were using rudimentary technology. With LSSP2, technology has changed, very available and adaptable. We use the GPS, it come up with a sketch, which sketch then is taken along with the rest of the information gathered to the EMZO to plot it on what we call the cadastre.
Okay, a series of technical words, but we need to move.
Okay, so now, then after it is sketched, plotted, we bring it back for people to see, verify, and agree that yes, this is what was done, this is how it looks like. The clinic is here, the well is there, and all plotted in that rapid plan that Vicent mentioned.
Okay.
Then we seek, because of the law and what is provided in the law, these rights are affirmed at the District Land Board, whereby then it is taken to the EMZO to produce titles.
Okay.
Now, there are advantages and for both the community and the government. And I had prepared slides which you said could not be done, so allow me to outline the advantages to the benefits.
Yeah, in 3 minutes.
In 3
so we
minutes.
come back, yeah.
Yeah, it's all inclusive, as I said. It accords tenure security, allows mobility. By this we mean that a person can leave Koboko, come to Kampala, work, knowing that their land will be there, specified. And they have a piece of paper to it. So it cannot disappear. With modern technology, once it is plotted, it is on the satellite, they are assured. So they can move all over the world and come back and find their piece of land. They can pursue personal goals away from the piece of land, which is not possible because today in customary tenure, you move away, you never know what you'll find when you have gone. The availability of land information, because one of the things that Grace has pointed out is not knowing whose land is what, fraudulent transfers, all these kind of things. Now you have an authentic land information system in place for both the people and the government. Easy access to services, because we plan, you have the roads in there and everything has to be there. So you have a fiscal plan in place which helps both the community and the government. It's quick and cheaper, much cheaper. Today, to get a surveyor to go and survey a land, you may not spend less than 3 million. From our calculation, and Dr. Msings can help out, I think for somebody to get a title, under this systematic demarcation, you may not go more than 500,000. So it's much cheaper. Improved for the government, it promotes land use planning. It improves local governance and social stability. We have reduced the land disputes. And a comprehensive national land system is a must for all of us. And of course, it is a source of revenue. Today, land transactions generate quite a bit of revenue for the country. What have we learned? Lastly, as I conclude, we have learned quite a bit. We are still learning, but at least we have an operational manual where government, Ministry of Lands, but also any other agency can be authorized to use the manual to follow the same procedure and same steps to do it in any other part of the country. We have issues that have come up to do with policy, politics and policy. We have funding and implementation. Technology, as I said, it has improved and we can move faster. And there is the issue of social acceptability, the first part of that systematic demarcation. Okay. And all those have their own tenets that have come up that I'm not able to share because I don't have the PowerPoint. But these are lessons that we have drawn and we have categorized them in 4. That is funding and implementation, political and policy issues, social acceptability, and technology availability and adoption.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abi. What you talked about was a bit technical, but I was paying attention and it is very critical. Before I come back to the rest of the panel, and I leave you what you just said, if my community wants to invite you to help us to do that, what do? We want you to apportion our land, and we don't want stress. We want you to come and we agree as neighbors and we have our titles. How do you get it to come?
That has come up in the ministry. I know from my colleagues since the piloting of the program, many districts, many communities have written to the ministry. But the drivers for that request are both personal, for a leader who thinks that this program, knows about this program and thinks it can benefit. Yeah. The problem you find that, yes, we can, and we have gone to such communities, but still you find obstacles. And what we have learned over that is now, before we go to a community, we have to make sure that 80% of that community is receptive. You do a survey? Yes, we do some kind of pre-program, pre-visiting. We go and talk to the communities through the district first, the next level, and the next level. And we sometimes we have requested that we need people to sign up. That if a village has about 150 households, at least 80% of those households would have endorsed. So if we're 100%, you will come? Even if it is 80%, okay. We try to go. Let's come back to the panel. So many things have been said and there's a lot of information that has been shared. Before we move on to the panel, the audience wrote to us a little bit earlier, and most of them were not even speaking about titling and fragmentation. They were speaking about land disputes, and you can understand. Louis Triggered here said, with people on the lookout for each other, if people look out for each other, such disputes will fade as it was during the era of our great-grandparents. So it's appealing to the social community, people looking out for each other. Sentongo 100 says, clean the judiciary and fight corruption. All land grabbers use courts of law. Now, there's ADR and there's law. I don't know. Maybe we'll respond to that. Jebron Mukundane says, the Minister of Lands and other accountable officials should take action and do what's really needed in issuing land titles to landholders and imprisoning land grabbers, as long as it will have to help to settle land disputes. I want to finish up with Mr. Kasango Yasiri Jr. He says, the land disputes are caused by corruption and the traditional owned land. Those are the views. I want to come back to you, Professor Msingozi. You have heard everything said, nice plans, some things in the pipeline. What are the realities on the ground we have to encounter, so to speak, to overcome this, so that these nice things come to pass in as far as land is concerned?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. As you have heard from the presenters, of course, what we see mainly from the ministry are plans. And it has been made very clear that these are new plans, not old plans. But I can confirm to you that the situation on the ground is not good. And if we don't take immediate actions now, we are headed for disaster. So if we take area plans, of course, we shall save costs because delayed implementation of these interventions is increased investment into rectifying the problems when actually we have no option in the future. So definitely we must start thinking about some of these good plans that I have heard from the Director, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development. How do we move people into organized settlements and free up land for agriculture, meaningful commercial agriculture? So I think let's wait and see, but I think what I see from now, they are good plans. My worry is actually that we may never implement these plans.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you, Professor. Systematic titling, and I'll come back to the Director from Ministry of Lands. It is needed, but does government want that to happen, seeing that some people, human players, in that, let me ask the question again. Does government want to see that, whereby the human players in there benefit from status quo? I mean, there's a good intention to title, but there are players there who are part of government who benefit from status quo. Do you think that's not a defeating aspect? How do we deal with that as a problem?
You mean that there would be guys who would prefer that
things remain the way they are?
Oh, yeah. You will get that kind of situation in almost every society, where you get people whom might be benefiting from a bad system, and you have to find ways around it. And as government, we have to do that. You must have heard about the land information system, which we are putting in place to remove human hands, quite a lot of human hands in a lot of things. And so what has to happen is that we have to keep thinking. You see, where there is a hole, you plug it, so that those people who might be benefiting from the status quo will just not have a way.
Yes, Professor, you have a burning point.
Yeah, I have a burning point, and thank you so much. Well, I think there is always that saying that probably some people might want to frustrate this because they are going to benefit from it. But from the areas where we have carried out systematic adjudication, mainly on the customary land, because we have done it in Kasese, we have done it in Chisoro, in Kabare, in Ajumani, in Nwoya, and many other places. Originally, when we started it, people were very suspicious, as usual. They were asking, how can such a good plan be initiated by government? Maybe government has ulterior motives. But then when people started getting certificates, now people started appreciating. In fact, right now, when you go in the rural areas, people actually want you to come. Because you don't have capacity and funding to cover all of them, you finally say, okay, this time we're going to work on maybe 10,000, next time we shall come. So if there is any fear about misusing this information, I think that's fear right now, at least from the experience we have, is quite unfounded.
Okay. Ms. Chelimo, are you there? There's some point you raised on fraudulent land acquisition. And if I understand you well, this is a situation where we have multiple titles. I have a title in the system. Somebody comes and says, I also have a title. How are we going to handle that animal? And it comes from a land office sometimes, maybe not the central, but even the districts. How are we going to deal with that problem to make all these nice things come to pass?
Thank you very much, moderator. The multiple land titling happens in the Ministry of Lands. And what I can say about is that the land information system that Ministry of Lands is scaling up will mitigate the multiple land titling in the Ministry of Lands. However, the Ministry of Lands also needs to strengthen its anti-corruption mechanisms to ensure that the staff of the Ministry of Lands, and even the surveyors and the land administration structures at the grassroots do not perpetrate corruption and fraudulent land transactions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Kojo, are you still there?
Yes, please.
Yes, you spoke about the plan to kind of bring organized settlements where people are not scattered over building bungalows over a very large area of land, maybe perhaps building apartments and things like this. But we have challenges like culture, the way things have been. And then there is also the politics, so to speak, to some extent. How are we going to succeed to get people who are used to staying wherever they want to come together? Practically, how do we translate from the intention to action?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think this is a pertinent issue. There are a lot of experiences from other countries, but personally, I think it's possible in Uganda. Government has no any right to run away from its responsibilities. For instance, the land laws, the constitution gives a right planning and environment conditions for us to be able to attain certain public good. I look at physical planning now being a public good. Now, if we look at it as a public good, that means that government can be able to acquire some land through purchase and be able to allocate land in terms of adjustments, give services, and be able to free some land for people to use it for agriculture by giving them enabling environment in terms of economies of scale. This I talked about cooperative societies. This land which seem to be owned by government, by individuals. I'm sure the experience is showing if people are given initiatives for compensations, they are willing to let off their land and live in a more organized kind of housing settlements vis-a-vis other services being given to them to be able to have production in these areas. I gave example, if for instance we look at some areas and buy land, maybe an acre at 5-10 million currently, it is better than to wait for the land to be fragmented and the cost becomes much more expensive at this 30-40 million an acre in the next 5-10 years. We rather take the bull by its horn and be able, if it means borrowing money, to invest in land reform and land adjustments and the planning. It's the time to do it now. Government will get its back money through proper taxes, through betterment levies. One of the good examples which I want to give is government comes in, gives a road service when the land possibly is 5 million an acre, but when one is selling land, he sells it at 25 million shillings. This 20 million, he has not added any value, becomes speculative. This money should be able to go to government to be able to provide services. I think it's possible to move towards that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kojo. And I'm coming back to Professor. I know, I'll tell you a short story in 1 minute. Once a lady went abroad and had land, like an acre, and then said, but there's nothing I'm going to do on that land now. So he left some kind of poor neighbor on that land with the children. She went away she kept on checking on them for about 8 years. Guess what happened? After 8 years, she comes back and says, guys, I want my land. We can find you where to go. Now the sons of the woman who was left on that land claim and say, we are bona fide occupants. We want compensation. in all these plans, do you think there's a problem with the law which needs to be amended in that space? What do you think, Prof?
Yeah, obviously, you are right. The law has to be amended to accommodate the new thinking or the new innovation that we are talking about. Let me give you just a simple example about what Dr. Abi was talking about. Here in Uganda, the laws that we have promote what we call sporadic adjudication. If I want to have my land titled, I have to go through a very tedious process. And this tedious process has inbuilt mechanisms for checking that fraud does not take place. Transparency, participation, and so on. These things, like you go apply to the area land committee, the neighbors must be there, you have to display it for 2 weeks. All those are to ensure that actually finally when you get a title, then you have no any other person claiming the same piece of land. Now, you see, from the time when we started titling land, that was around 1900, up to now, we are still talking about 20% of the land. Only 20%. Meaning that we need about 500 years if we remain at this pace to have the entire land covered so that we are able to eliminate most of these boundary disputes. Now the current law will not take us there. If you are going to implement what we call systematic adjudication, we must change the law. We must change the law to enable all these processes to take place very quickly. Then also from Grace's presentation, I think there is now a recognition that actually we should give more weight to ADR, alternative dispute resolution, than the formal litigation. But then our law still puts the formal litigation on the top.
Ahead.
Because let me say I'm a rich man and I go in a village, then I grab land belonging to maybe 100 people. So we can go to ADR, but if I'm a rich man, I know that ADR is going to stop at some point, and we shall go to litigation. And during litigation, evidence. Many people in the rural areas don't even understand evidence, but they have morals. Many of them actually up to now have morals, although it's also increasingly going away. So under alternative dispute resolution, you actually find that people will be in harmony. And even all these criminal cases which come as a result of land disputes, they will go away. So my answer, yes, we must look at the law and we look at those aspects which will support what we are thinking. Okay. Thank you so much.
Dr. Abi, you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to build on to your example.
Yes.
Experience, and I always tell those who I interact with, especially students, that the divide between modernity and tradition is a piece of paper and a pen. Yeah. Once we get into writing and documenting things, we run away from the well-wishing of a neighbor who is poor, who I am leaving a piece of land, and assuming that they are thinking like I am thinking.
They are good.
Tradition, they are good and all that kind of thing. Because without a piece of paper, you are likely to go into those. That lady may have had a title, but because the gift, the goodwill she gave to these people, she didn't think of putting it on a piece of paper that I'm giving you this until I'm going away. When I come back, I expect da, 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 da. So she has no, like he says, evidence. She has no starting point, even when she has a title. But the coming into possession of this land by these people makes it a very complicated situation. So a piece of paper is very important.
So write down things.
You write down things. And the same argument is extended to the titling. We've moved around this country, and many people will argue that no customary land has existed and we have never done anything and all that. You know? So why now? Yeah? And I asked one person, I said, okay, I am my mother's daughter, my parents' daughter.
Yeah.
Why do I need a birth certificate? Nobody is going to dispute that I am Sebina's daughter. But I need a birth certificate for different reasons. So that is the same argument. You need this title or a certificate of customary ownership for different things. Because we cannot stay in that traditional mode when the world is moving the other side.
I'm told we have 3 minutes. I'll come back to our host, Prof. Trust is important. She goes to Kastokoso, tries to register this land in a nice way. People say, go away. Trust. How do we infuse trust in these issues so all the plans Vincent outlined work? That's our final comment from you, Professor.
Trust is very difficult to plan for and also very difficult to expect. So when we are doing these things, we say, yes, there is trust, but let's put everything down. So a clear example which you gave, of course there was trust, but if things had been put down, maybe the situation would have been different. Yeah, thank you.
Viewers, we could have, the conversation was beginning to warm up, but our time has run out, and we have had very good information from these distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and we have been discussing how to build consensus on how to address systematic land titling and physical planning, land fragmentation, and disputes in Uganda. The conversation has to continue. Solutions have to come in a holistic way. This is just part of the solution. I hope you enjoyed our discussion, and we hope you'll continue the conversation, and you'll go to the ministry, you'll look for Prof and everybody else on the panel for answers. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.